Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming to the talk about chairpersons, program directors, and clerkship directors, how this triumvirate can make or break the educational mission of a department. If you kind of came in here all confused looking for the beach, we need to have a serious discussion about your day drinking. It might be out of hand. Otherwise, if you're here for the legitimate reasons, we do thank you for that. All three of us are from the same institution, Cooper Med School of Rowan University in Camden, New Jersey. My name is Sundip Patel. I've been a clerkship director for about 10 years now.
How's everybody doing? I'm Drew Nice. I'm a program director for the past 10 years, clerkship director for about 5 years before that in between an APD. So about 17, 18 years in education.
And I'm Mike Chansky. I'm the founding chair of what was UMDNJ Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, Emergency Medicine, transitioned to our four-year school, Cooper Medical School of Rowan University, and obviously was present for the beginning of our program, which was 1995.
So real quickly, we're going to go through the objectives of our talk. Number one, we're going to describe the unique roles and responsibilities of chairs, program directors, clerkship directors as it relates to education. Two, we'll describe how this triumvirate can create a culture of education. I think this is the most important point. If you were going to leave with one point from this talk, I hope it's going to be this one, that a culture of education truly is important in your department. Three, identify ways that chairs, program directors, and clerkship directors can work together to improve education of students as well as residents. And then finally, recognize issues that can lead to tension between those three positions. And we're actually going to show you a couple of issues that have come up in our ED, and actually maybe concentrate more about the collaboration that went along to kind of ease those tensions. So with regards to roles and responsibilities, a show of hands, how many clerkship directors are in this room? Okay. Program directors? Are there any chairs? So we have one. And I can say this, that most clerkship directors, I think, understand the roles and responsibilities of their program directors and vice versa. So maybe we can skip that part. Why don't we have a chair? We have a unicorn in the room that can talk about the roles and responsibilities, especially as it pertains to education and who they have to answer to.
Come on. So obviously as chair, I have a lot of diverse individuals sort of looking over what we do as a group. And it's very clear I have a couple roles within my institution. I'm on the board of trustees. I'm on the executive committee of the board of trustees. I also represent all the other chairs and chiefs in a very small group. We're also on our compensation committee. And as chair for as many years as I've been there, hearing over and over and over again how emergency physicians, work 28 hours a week and everyone wants our job, gets very annoying and repetitive. And what pressures on us for productivity, for obviously teaching, the medical school putting pressure on us for obviously mentoring students, success of the match, looking at board passage rate of our own residents, and balancing service and education and really being representing the institution, the value of education as an overall mission of both our medical school and our training program. So I have an advantage of having started the program with the foundation that service and education being balanced and maintaining that through staffing of the emergency department appropriately in order to give both our patients and residents the most ideal opportunity to be both trained and obviously take the best care of patients. But I had to do that with the background that our productivity was at benchmarks, institutionally and compared to other similar academic centers, which thankfully that data was borne out, and it really allowed me to act very proactively to staff our department the way I saw fit. While I did have some some overseeing of the way I staff the department in working with our clerkship director and program director and the residents. I also have an advantage and a belief that the chair should work very actively in the emergency department. So I've always been a chair that works a lot of shifts and continues to work a lot of shifts, which gives me a lot of credibility with administration as far as our needs. So in working closely with Sonny and Drew through the years, we all approach these problems and challenges from the exact same page. And I do understand that there are chairs out there who may not have similar priorities that are your priorities. And part of the challenge of this as clerkship director and program director is to be in sync with your chair and make sure that obviously your chair shares your passion and the importance of balancing service education and developing the best clerkship experience, residency experience, and ultimately faculty experience. And we're going to touch upon some of the challenges and things that we've done to, I think, accomplish that. So I think, Drew, you're going to...
Sure. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more from a bigger picture perspective on what we've done over the years to try to build a culture of education within our department. And I can tell you we've had some wins, we've had some opportunities for improvement, and this doesn't happen overnight. It's taken years to work on it. We continue to work on it every day, really. And it's really about developing, again, a culture of collaboration among all of us and within our department. And there's a few things that we've done that I think have been effective and worked. And one of the first things we've done is really recognize our educators for the skills that they have. I mean, they're outstanding educators. They have a certain skill, and they need to be recognized for that. They need the protected time, and they need to be, again, given opportunities for faculty development with regards to education. We need to value them just as much as we value our research directors, just as much as we value our medical director, process improvement directors. We want to value our outstanding educators, and we want to recognize them publicly, praise them publicly for what they do, whether it's in faculty meetings, what have you. So that's really important to help develop a culture of education. The second thing we did that I think was pretty effective is that we tried to basically, we as Dr. Chansky was saying, education is one of the pillars of our department. It's a core value of our department, and we have to recognize that and make sure that everybody understands that. And we're all responsible for RBUs, we know this. We're all responsible for our productivity. We're all responsible for our patient experience scores. And that goes into our formula for our incentives. But we also, over the years, have added in educational metrics into that formula in order to be basically eligible for your incentives. And some of those educational metrics include things like resident and student evaluations, compliance with those. Actually, there are actual evaluations of students and residents, how well they're doing. There's some other metrics that we do. But again, we incorporate those into our incentive package, basically, to value how much education means to our department. And another thing that we recognize and took years to develop is that we really recognize that each level of education in our department is equally important. From the student director and student resources to the residency program and then to faculty development, every level has to be given the amount of protected time, the opportunities for resources, and we have to maximize each of those levels of education, because if one level breaks down, then we really depend on each other, because if we don't have a great student program, then we're going to maybe have challenges recruiting the best residents or students to become residents. And then if we have a great residency program with education, then that is a feeding ground, so to speak, for our faculty to continue that message and that culture of education among our best residents to faculty. I have to digress for a minute and talk about a parallel that my residents usually roll their eyes at me when I talk about sports analogies, but I have to here. Some people, some familiar faces here, and they're laughing, is that, I think it's very similar to a baseball organization. If you look at any professional baseball organization, a baseball team, generally speaking, they're as good as they are, and it's really a result of the system. If you put resources into your scouting, into your player development, into, training and working with your college athletes, your student athletes to get them caught up to speed and really train them to be the best pros, that's going to really develop your professional organization, and your professional team is most likely going to succeed. It's the same thing within our education organization, is that we have to develop our farm team. We develop our students. We have to put resources in the student education and the clerkship. We have to develop our higher level farm team with the residents so they can eventually become professionals, become the faculty, and become great educators. So again, we really rely on each other and depend on each other to move this educational mission forward. You know, we as leaders, we really have to represent, we have to lead, and it's something vitally important that we do is we have to encourage faculty development, and we have to give faculty opportunities to do that. And that's whether that's in your department, whether that's from your institution, your medical school, or even nationally. That's something that we have to really encourage to do. And, you know, and that's not just from the faculty. It's really important from a resident perspective, too, that we help develop our residents with regards to their educational mission and skill set. I'll give you one example that I have for one of my residents is that as part of my responsibilities, I run this special review committee for the GME where we deal with programs that have issues with their educational effectiveness and try to help them. And one of the residents is on that committee with me, and they really have learned a lot about how to work with other programs, develop that culture of education, and, you know, increase the effectiveness of the education. So again, that's something that's really incumbent on us to do to help develop and maintain this culture of education. Now, we just heard a great talk about, you know, what do we do with the indifferent educators or the faculty who really just aren't as invested in the educational mission like maybe the three of us or many of the other faculty. So, you know, I won't go into too many details there, but again, there's obviously opportunities for faculty development, and there were a lot of great ideas in the last session. Again, your incentive package may be affected if your educational metrics aren't where they should be comparably. Maybe we may not be able to decrease the CME money due to contractual issues, but we can offer more CME money and encourage residents or encourage faculty to do more faculty development programs with regards to education. And the other thing that we've done is to develop a culture of education is that, similar to what they said last session, is that, you know, I don't know how your departments are working over the past years, but our department is much more compartmentalized than it's been years ago. So there's many shifts that we don't work with residents. Faculty don't work with residents. And, you know, we look at working with residents as a privilege, as an honor. It's not an expectation for the faculty. So if there's faculty who don't basically buy into the educational mission of the program, you know, then they're going to work more or less, or they're going to work less with residents. And it's going to be an opportunity and celebrate the educational mission of our program and allow those great educators to work with our residents. So that's some of the things that we've done over the years, which again helps build and develop this culture of education. So I want to turn it back over to Sonny, and he's going to give us some more details on how we've collaborated together more civically on how to build this culture.
Cool, thank you. So, you know, that culture of education is paramount to develop, and there's definitely ways we can do this. Communication is the easiest way. It has to be constant and open. More importantly, it can't be in individual silos. So I can't just handle all the undergraduate stuff and not discuss it with these two, and vice versa. Drew can't just do the graduate medical education and not share with either one of us. When you have that open, constant communication, it leads to collaboration and really leads to a culture of education. Having no fear to bring up any topics. So if I feel there are resources that need to be available to teach our students, I have that ability to walk into Dr. Chansky's office and ask him for that. And not fear that, oh my God, I'm going to get reprimanded. And same thing, if there's a resident issue, I can go right to Drew. But the most important thing is also to understand the other person's side. So, you know, I may want a $100,000, you know, beautiful brand new simulator, but to, you know, run into my chair's office and not realize, hey, you know what, times are really tight right now. There's a hiring freeze. Resources aren't available. That's just not the right thing to do. More importantly, I should say, hey, why don't I go into his office and maybe we can discuss other options, you know, other ways we can get around not having that beautiful new simulator so that we can still educate our students and residents quite well. Collaboration is the key here, and communication definitely is a key component to this. But one thing that's really helped us, and I know this sounds like a small point, but it's very important, is our offices are physically very close to each other. If you drew a triangle, almost 10 feet apart is where our offices sit. And that really enables us to attack problems in real time. You can do things over email, but if I fire off an email, maybe he's working or maybe he's in a board meeting. So I might not get a response back in 5 minutes or 5 hours. If we're all there together, it's so much easier to tackle the problem and just handle it right there and then. By the same token, if my office was down the street at the med school, this just wouldn't work. So having your offices close to each other can really help collaboration. Having an open door policy, we never mention this, and it's because it's just become our culture. The doors in all of our offices are open. And what that does, it just stimulates conversation. And sometimes, yes, it is a little bit of venting, a little bit of letting off steam, but I can't tell you how many times those conversations to vent have led to some great solutions. So having the door open is really key. This constant communication, I keep harping on it, but the only way this happens is if you allow it to happen. So it is really important. But one thing we've implemented that has really helped us collaborate even more is we have these monthly medical education meetings. In this meeting, you have the program director, the associate program director, the assistant program director, both clerkship directors, any core faculty that are involved in education. We all sit down. We have an agenda beforehand where we discuss current topics. We try to troubleshoot things that are going to happen in the future. And we come to a nice consensus. We actually don't invite the chair to that meeting because we realize he goes to a lot of meetings. This is not another meeting we need to force him to come to. We try to solve the problems as a group, and if we come to an impasse, that is when we actually do kick it up to Dr. Chansky. And guess what? He now knows this isn't just someone's pet, little mission, but we met as a group. We kind of vetted this thing, and we're kind of coming to him as we really need him. Evaluations are another example of how we work together. Again, it's very easy to stay in your silo. I'm going to handle all the student evals. Drew's going to handle all the resident evals. Dr. Chansey's going to handle all the faculty evals. And that's not exactly how we do things. What we really like to do is we get together and we discuss issues. So there's really a nice multidisciplinary approach. We look for ways to improve, and most importantly, we can customize remediation. I think that's important because let's say it's a faculty member that needs to have some remediation. Well, we each have a separate relationship with that faculty member, and sitting together, we can figure out what is the best way we can approach that and really attack it. And sometimes, more importantly, sometimes when you don't need to do it. So, I'll be all gung-ho. I see a bad comment from a student about a faculty member. I want to run into their office. And luckily, these guys calm me down, and they say, look, that is a great educator. That's an isolated comment. Let's just kind of watch it. If it's a trend, we need to act on it. So I really do think that's a great example of how we can work together. So let's briefly talk about certain issues that lead to tension, but I think more importantly that have led to collaboration. One of the issues that cropped up in our ED were teaching shifts. So these are shifts where a faculty member is scheduled to come in and they only hear student cases. They're not going to hear any resident cases. They're really not looked upon to just move that department. They're there to educate. They're there to observe students do bedside teaching and a lost art. So I'm going to put on my clerkship director's hat. And at this point in the talk, I was going to reach down. I was going to grab a hat, put it on my head that said, "Make America Great Again." And then I was going to be like, oh, crap, wrong hat. I actually discussed that with Drew beforehand, who was very polite and said that's probably one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. So that was a great example of honest, open communication and collaboration. So, I do appreciate that. But, with regards to teaching shifts, as a clerkship director, this is the best thing since sliced bread. You're telling me there's going to be a faculty member that's going to come in, they're going to listen to student cases, do one-on-one teaching, bedside teaching. They're going to directly observe student HMPs because they can do it. They're not worried about really moving that department. This is amazing, right? Students love it. So much one-on-one time with a faculty member. And guess what? I have a cramped ED. I got to get students to do these shifts. I can schedule 2 to 3 students onto this shift. This is an amazing thing. Students are happy about it. Happy students lead to great evaluations. Great evaluations lead to happy med school. Happy med school means that's one less thing we got to worry about, right? So teaching shifts, from my perspective, are amazing. I want a teaching shift every day, but I understand there's a cost associated to this. So, I'm willing to not have, a teaching shift every day, but we need to have these. So I'd like to turn it over to Drew to see what his perspective is on teaching shifts.
Yeah, so when we were discussing the teaching shifts, I thought it was a great idea too. It's like, wow, this is great because again, we want to have the medical students have the best experience that they can. They're going to have wonderful experience. They're going to rank our program highly, and we're going to be able to recruit them, which is obviously one of our goals. And then I was like, well, this would also be a win because we can have basically more time for the faculty in the department to teach my residents. because then we have an extra faculty member who's teaching the students. So that sounded like a win too. So then I was thinking more about it. I'm like, well, there are some challenges in that. What are we doing with the teaching shifts? I mean, we're using our best educators for our teaching shifts. And then are we compromising our residents' education because we're pulling out our best educators for the teaching shifts? So these are a lot of the issues that we would discuss back and forth, and how to balance this rotation and balance this schedule in order to make everybody sort of, happy and make this work the best we can.
Dr. Chansky, you want to give your thoughts?
Yeah, so the challenge is the teaching shift really came about because as we developed our mandatory clerkship and had so many students on shifts, the students and residents were obviously competing for faculty time, the EDs continuing to get busy, and it was clear that education was being compromised for both residents and students. So the medical school had a sort of policy that faculty were expected to give 50 hours a year to teaching of medical students in exchange for their faculty appointment. So when we first discussed developing a teaching shift, we developed a 6-hour shift, 2 or 3 students. That faculty member was unique. They did see some patients with the students. As Sonny said, they were observed HMPs. They did procedures together. The faculty member was responsible for the patients. And at first, faculty member, that was just part of their academic, protected time. And as you might imagine, that really didn't work very well. Because the faculty who were doing those shifts were primarily our best teachers. They already were the faculty that were committing the most time to the training program, and they were feeling like they were putting in many more hours than other faculty. So my challenge was how to credit faculty with clinical hours for these shifts so that more faculty would want to do them. And what we eventually settled on was a 6-hour shift. You get 4 hours of credit toward your clinical time. Now, to be honest, I didn't really ask anyone for permission. I just went ahead and did it. I just used my clout and said, this is what we're going to do for our schedule. The faculty members do see in those 6 hours anywhere from 4 to 10 patients that go and that, they're part of their RVUs. We don't count those hours in their productivity, so they're actually a little bit extra productivity. And the net result of doing that has just been overwhelmingly positive for the educational culture of our department, the student experience, the residents who are working that shift, the faculty who are working that shift, because that faculty member is siphoning off anywhere from 8 to 12 patients or so during the shift from the volume. And we have just found that it has been a win-win-win for faculty, students, and residents, and education and the culture in the department. The students, Sonny can comment on the student evaluations and Drew, the resident evaluations, but I will say the faculty one-on-one now like the teaching shifts and request them, and there's more requests for those shifts in our schedule requests than there have ever been. So it has ended up being a win for all.
And I think we need to stress this sounds like this was great. This happened overnight. It was very rosy, no issues, and that is not exactly how this happened at all. It took years. And there were a lot of changes when the teaching shifts first came about. Faculty were gung-ho, and then they were like, I'm not getting paid for the shift. This is horrible. Right. And then I had to scrounge and try to find faculty, and I'm like, come on, please, can you work this Tuesday teaching shift? It's going to be great.
We ended up doing them, the 3 of us.
And, then we realized it is a tough shift. You have 3 students on your hip, and you're observing HMPs, you're running them through procedures, you're writing their notes, you're also doing the discharge paperwork. It takes a lot of time and effort. And so we put a monetary value to it. And, it's still an evolution. I think it's at a good point. But, I'm now pushing Drew. I'm like, you know what? We should put some residents on that shift, so that they can learn how to be educators. It just seems like a great solution. So, it's a good example where we didn't meet once. We met multiple times, and we re-review what we did, and we keep meeting over it. And it's evolved into something really special. So a couple of key points to take away.
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You mentioned 3. Have you found over the years what's the best ratio
That's a great question. I think 3 is the max. And you are running when you have 3. It's hard. I usually will pick a part of their history or physical to evaluate. But you know what? What do you do with the other 2 students during that time period? So if you're crazy, you can let them see other patients on their own, while you're watching the H&P. But guess what? Once you settle that student, you're going to have 2 presentations waiting for you when you get back.
Let me just add one thing that the past few years we've had residents who have used their elective time to do education. And actually this year, to make a long story short, we're going to start to incorporate that into the 3rd year's responsibilities to do some teaching shifts, some pre-attending shifts. We have a little bit of more fat in the system. And that if we have a resident who's on the teaching, on the teaching shift, you can probably do 3 pretty comfortably because they really help educate and help with the workload. But alone, 2's good, 3's pushing it, but with the resident, you can definitely do 3. 4 is probably too much.
Have you found that the teaching shift works better during busier times or not busier times?
Busier times definitely helps out. Classically ours are scheduled on Mondays and Tuesdays, just because there's going to be a glut of patients coming your way. There's no fighting over patients, so that's generally when we've scheduled them. And also to keep it away from resident teaching days or resident lecture days has helped out quite a bit. All right. For sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next issue. So quick take-home points here are one-on-one teaching from the teaching shifts are great. Expense can be a deterrent, but I think this is where you need to work together and figure out what is best to balance the logistics of doing this shift, the educational win that can come from this, and obviously the cost to the shift. But one issue we want to bring up was overnight shifts. So I'm going to set the stage for you. Our overnights used to be single covered for a time period. So we had 2 attendings up until 3 in the morning, and then that one attending would leave, and then you were single covered from 3 to 7. And it sounds like 4 hours, that's not a big deal. However, you have 3 residents, 3 EM residents, a 3rd year, 2nd year, 1st year. You may have a medicine resident on, and then you may also have a student on. And our census was creeping up and up and up. And I can tell you, many times where you would get hit with 2 cases and you went and saw those 2 patients, you'd come back and your residents would be waiting with another 2 to 3 cases. And sometimes you're like, did I look at the vital signs on that chart? I really hope I looked at the vital signs. Or what about the EKG? So again, we're going to look at it from each perspective. So as a clerkship director, I want my students on the overnight shifts for a lot of reasons, right? The pathology that walks through the doors, interesting creatures that can walk through the doors on overnights, but they can learn a lot, right, from those shifts. They have a little bit more autonomy on overnights, which students love. More chances at getting procedures because you know what? The residents are running like crazy. They're going to look to the student. Do you want to suture that? Do you want to drain that abscess? So students, again, love this. And one thing I really love about these shifts is for the non-EM bound students to understand what we do on an overnight shift so that you don't have that student that matches in family medicine, and finally becomes an attending, and all of a sudden they're like 3 in the morning, oh, my patient's having foot pain. I'll send them to the ER. They should get an MRI of their foot, just to make sure it's not osteo. To understand, yeah, we don't do MRIs at 3 in the morning. I think there's a lot of value to that. Now, look, that shift's busy. So I understand maybe their education component's going to be decreased, but I think the other aspects of the shift outweigh that. But you know what? I understand. I've worked those shifts, and I'm not going to lie. Being the clerkship director, I would look at the schedule and be like, it would be nice if there's not a student on this shift tonight, so that I can survive. So, my solution was I'm going to only schedule the students for 1 overnight. And that way they get a little bit of a taste, but I do protect the rest of my faculty, especially the nocturnists. Because God forbid, I don't want them to leave, and then I have to do more overnights. So that was my perspective.
Yeah, and my perspective, it was mostly about balance of service versus education. I mean, we were talking about overnights, but it could be your 3 to 12 shift or day shift, whatever, in your department where it's the busiest. But it's really a balance of service versus education, and that pendulum swung way too far towards service on the overnight shifts. I'd have residents in my office getting emails and saying, it's crazy. The attending is seeing X number of patients overnight. They don't have opportunities to see the patients, to give us education. And that really compromised the core values of really what we stood for. But it was really hard to look at those. Believe me, I worked the overnights. I know exactly what it was like, but it's hard to go, to the chairman who's extremely supportive of the educational mission and to say, look, we need double covered overnights every night. Because again, the faculty are my friends or my colleagues, and we were all pretty much maxed out with our hours, and we didn't have more faculty to hire. We just can't hire faculty in a week. So how do you manage this? So I knew I wasn't going to walk in his office and say, we need double cover faculty overnight for the next for now on. And he'd say, sure, okay, let's just sign him up. That wasn't going to happen. So what I really tried to pitch and negotiate is that, look, let's trial this in the summer. Let's trial it on the Fridays and Saturday nights in Camden in the summer, if you know what I mean, right? So there may not be as many patients numbers wise, but the resources and the bedside basically time that you need, laceration repair, what have you, really takes up a lot of time. So, and that was at the peak of our students coming in. That was our new interns, everybody was changing roles within the residency program. So I think it was an opportunity to really emphasize education is important to us. Let's start with Friday and Saturday nights. So let's trial it just for the summer and let's see how it goes. Now again, how did we have to pitch that to the faculty of, okay, now you have to work more overnights on the weekends in the summer. It's exactly what everybody wanted to do. But I can tell you that it went from everybody moaning and groaning and saying that's ridiculous to, after the first few, everybody wanted to sign up for those shifts because it was just it decompressed the angst. They were fun again. You had a little bit more time to teach and to do and actually talk to your patients, take care of your patients at the bedside, and really it turned into a huge win. But again, there are a lot of other issues with doing that, which Dr. Chansky I know wants to expand on.
Yeah, so what do chairs do? They look at data. So the arrival data for our evening and night shifts clearly supported what Drew and Sonny said, was that we were creeping up in terms of volume and the number of patients that the faculty member was responsible for on overnights. And even our most proactive, assertive faculty at the end of a 7 to 3 shift in the morning were definitely not able to pick up as many patients, toward the end of that shift to help out on the overnights. So we met with our scheduler and actually with all our operation people, and literally overnight, we moved to 2 faculty and overnights by moving everyone who had the 7 to 3 shift to overnights, and we tweaked our schedule a little bit for the 2 months we still had in the schedule, and we literally did it overnight. And the faculty who were most against overnights or who disliked overnights, who when I recruited them, told me overnights were hard for them. Our core faculty who I want in their offices around, available to teach, who we wanted to work less overnights. It was amazing how instantly our overnight shift became almost a desirable shift, 7 days a week. And the other funny thing for me was in the Philadelphia Camden area, 2 people sort of came out of the blue contacting me who only work overnights, and it's sort of heard through the grapevine that our overnights were double covered, residents, fun. So I actually was able to hire 2 nocturnal faculty members who have been great additions within like 3 months of this decision. So we have been able to balance out teaching, and overnights have suddenly become as key and core part of our education clinical care as every other shift. And people come into overnights happy and ready to go. We also have a culture that we have overlap shifts, as I'm sure most of you have, and we decided when we added these hours, now that we have 2 attendings and overnights, so they'd go from maybe 30 to 45 patients on a shift to 15 to 25, that they could get some of their notes done. And so we stopped the overnight shift. We didn't have an overlap. That saved me 365 times 2 clinical hours in the schedule. But I asked my faculty who work 7 to 4, the morning shift, to come in at 20 of 6:30 and have a culture of getting the overnight attendings out on time. And that has happened. So all our faculty, really the culture is to come in early on the 7 to 4 shift and just be proactive about getting the overnight faculty out on time, which very often is 7:15, with their charts done and ready to go, and they're out of the garage before the nurses that change a shift. And obviously that benefits all of us, because when we work an overnight shift, we know our relief is coming at 20 of or Sometimes when I work at 6:30, they come in a little earlier for me, but.
So, and again, to stress this, just like the teaching shifts, this didn't happen overnight. This took a lot of iterations, a lot of work, and a lot of communication between us. So for the sake of time, I'm actually, we had another issue we're going to talk about, but we'll run past that. And we'll really open up to any questions. One question that, maybe I can even anticipate is that, we are lucky. We have a chair who's extremely supportive of what we want to do. We love education, and he's been instrumental in helping us create that culture. So you may be sitting there and saying, I don't have that. So what do I do in that situation? How can I get my chair to see things the way your chair sees things? So, I don't know, Drew, if you want to comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, I can. It's interesting because when like I talked about earlier, I do I chair the special review committee for my GME and deal with basically problem programs and programs that have issues. And one program in particular has a really, let's just say, challenging chairman who is not as supportive for the educational mission as you would like. He basically wants to run the whole ship without allowing the program leadership to really have a say with regards to development of curriculum, rotations, et cetera. And one of the things that has worked that we worked on with GME, and again, this is an opportunity for you, I call it the educational hammer that you have as ACGME and the RRC, is that think about using like a mediator, an arbitrator, and such as, I can tell you what we did. We have the DIO, we have the CMO, and basically the program director and the chairman for that department in a room, and they basically talk about educational issues. So they can really balance out the positives and negatives of each educational basically innovation that they want to do with, again, an arbitrator in the room. So that's something that you can think about doing if you have a really challenging chairperson who really just doesn't either let you do what you need to do or allow you to develop your educational mission. And that's something that has worked, and has worked pretty well with a very challenging chairman in another department.
Cool. Any other questions? Yes? Absolutely. I can't agree more with you. And, Drew mentioned it when some of our residents, our senior residents, have taken elective time to do like an educational elective. They've done that shift and they've been invaluable. And student comments, and even like your quietest resident, and we had one, and I was amazingly surprised at how great of an educator he was, and the students loved him. So totally agree. If there's an opportunity for you to do that, utilizing your residents for teaching shifts, you should absolutely try to do it.
I mean, we almost work in 2 seasons. I mean, there's the May to October season where students are highly motivated and the ones that want to do emergency medicine, the visiting students within your own medical school who are going into emergency medicine, which is such a pleasure, right? But a challenge. And then there's the second season, which is, the students from November to May who are going into psychiatry. And I have a son who's a psychiatry resident, so I feel like I can say that, who are obviously a little less motivated. And it's almost a tale of, of 2 completely different times. And we don't alter, well, we do a little bit with teaching shifts, I believe, but we, obviously our commitment to the education of the students is the same no matter what the season. There's just a different feel in the fall. And I know you all feel that too.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thanks for coming.